Hello, Year 12, and welcome to the first part of our ethics units. So, as we know, the A level is divided into three exams: Development in Christian Thought, Religion and Ethics, and the Philosophy of Religion. So we've completed the AS section of Development in Christian Thoughts, and now we're going to take a look at ethics. So this is what we'll be doing up until Christmas. So the purpose of this shorter, quick introduction lesson is just to introduce what ethics actually is. Okay, so let's get started. With ethics, it's always useful to explore our ideas with thought experiments. So thought experiments are imagined scenarios that we think through in order to try and crystallize or make sense of our ethical instincts, what we think is right, what we think is wrong. Okay, so I want you to imagine for a second that you're on a bridge and there are 5 people tied to a train track, and there is a train that is about to run them over, and they will die. You've got 2 options. One, do nothing and let the tram or the train kill the 5 people. Or 2, you can push a fat man on the bridge off, and he will die and will stop the train. So is this wrong? Please don't think about ways of escaping the thought experiment, because that's not the point. You can't run down and untie them, and you can't throw yourself in front of the train. The only option to stop the train is to kill this person. Okay, so maybe pause the video for a second and have a think about what you would do. Okay, well, most people would say that it's wrong to kill. So it would be wrong to push the fat man in front of the train. But having 5 people tied to the train track maybe changes things. And this is because you're saving 5 people's lives. Yes, you're killing 1 person, but it's better to let 1 person die than for 5 to die. You're potentially saving 4 people or 5 people, whereas if you don't do anything at all, you're only saving 1 person, the fat man. Obviously, if we look at B, everybody would say that it's wrong to push someone in front of a train for no reason. So let's imagine there was no one tied to the train track. But does it change things if you are saving more people, if there is a better outcome? Okay, so depending on your answer, you're either a deontologist or a consequentialist. So a deontologist or a consequentialist. So if you said that it was okay to push the fat man off, you are probably a consequentialist. And we're going to look at that today. A consequentialist is just somebody who believes that the right thing to do is based completely on the outcome. So it's right to push the fat man off the bridge because it leads to a greater outcome of 5 people being saved. The deontologist believes that it's always wrong or always right to perform a certain action, and the consequence doesn't matter. So a consequentialist would say that it's right to push the fat man off here, but it's wrong to push the fat man off here. And that's because there are different consequences to your action. The deontologist would say that it's wrong to push the fat man off in both situations, because it's always wrong to kill. It doesn't matter what the consequence is. Okay, so those are the 2 positions that we'll be looking at over the next 6 or 7 weeks. And we have 2 deontological ethical theories and 2 consequentialist ethical theories. So we have 4 ethical theories that we're going to be looking at. So let's take a quick rewind and let's actually look at what this word ethics means. So ethics comes from a Greek word, ethikos, which means character. And it refers to the way that you should behave in society. Morality comes from a Latin word which means moralis, which means right or wrong. So to be honest, these words are used interchangeably. So ethics, morality, ethical, moral, they're used to mean the same thing. But technically, ethics is about character, what kind of person you are, whereas morality is about what kind of behavior you perform, what kind of actions you perform. So they're very much similar and related. Okay, so there are lots of ethical theories. There's only 4 that we'll be looking at. And they are religious and philosophical ways of making moral decisions. 2 of the theories we'll be looking at are Christian, and 2 of the theories we'll be looking at are non-Christian. Okay, deontology. This comes from a Latin or Greek word, deontos. And deontos means duty. So think of D for deontology and D for duty. Deontological ethical theories are the idea that actions are always right or wrong in themselves. So if we go back to this example, our duty is to always perform the correct action, which is never to kill. And we've got a duty to do that. So killing is always wrong. Okay, so there'll be 2 deontological theories that we'll look at. One that's Christian and one that's non-Christian. Consequentialism is the opposite. This is about consequences. This means actions are only right or wrong if they lead to a good outcome. And this is sometimes called a teleological ethical theory as well. Telos means the end goal. Okay, so these systems, consequentialist or teleological, they say that right or wrong actions can change. It depends on the outcome. Obviously, in example B, it's wrong to kill because the outcome is just one person dying. But in example A, maybe it's suddenly right to kill because the outcome is saving 5 people. So consequentialist or teleological theories tend to be a bit more flexible, whereas deontological theories are very strict. Okay. Absolutism. So this comes from the word absolute, and this is the idea that some actions are absolutely right or wrong intrinsically, which means by their own nature. So deontological theories tend to be absolutist because they tend to believe that it's absolutely wrong to kill no matter what the situation is. So it's wrong to kill here and it's wrong to kill here as well. And that's because there is something intrinsic about killing that's wrong. There's something inside the act of killing that's just wrong. Relativism says that actions are right or wrong relative to the situation or the outcome. And this means that killing is right or wrong, or murder is right or wrong, or helping people is right or wrong instrumentally. So what that means is killing isn't right or wrong in itself. It's only right or wrong if it's being used as an instrument, okay, like the fat man here, to produce a better or worse outcome. So deontological theories tend to be absolutist. Consequentialist theories tend to be relativist. So a deontologist would say, no, it's always wrong. A consequentialist would say, well, it's relative, it depends. Depends on the situation. Okay, and utility means the usefulness of an action. So consequentialists believe in utility. Actions are good or bad insofar as they are useful for producing a good outcome. Deontologists don't believe in utility. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at in your AS level is normative ethics. Normative. This is the dominant approach to ethics until the end of the 19th century. It looks at what is good and what is bad. Okay, so normative means how should you behave? Let's compare that with other systems. So we have descriptive ethics, and descriptive ethics just tells us what people believe. So Muslims believe that it's wrong to eat pork. That's descriptive ethics. Then we have meta ethics, which is the philosophy of ethics. So why is it wrong to eat pork? What does wrong even mean? But in this unit, in your AS level, we'll be looking at normative ethics. And that's probably the ethics you're most familiar with. That's about what actually is right or wrong. What should we do? What is normal? That's the best way of looking at it. What should be the norm that we should live by? What should be right and what should be wrong? Okay, so we have ethics here. We have the sort of family tree of ethics. And it's divided into different theories. Okay, so we have non-cognitivist, descriptive. These are all meta-ethical theories. And we have normative ethics. And we have deontological and teleological. Now, these both come under absolutist, but teleological could sometimes come under relativist as well. So it sometimes depends. So these are the two main systems we'll be looking at. We'll be comparing deontological, which means duty. Some things are always right or always wrong. And teleological, which means it depends on the outcome. Okay, and some of these we've looked at already. So divine command theory, we looked at in the DCT unit. This is the idea that, you know, thou shalt not kill, Moses and the Ten Commandments. The two theories we'll be looking at specifically are natural law and Kantian ethics. These are the two deontological ethical theories. Natural law is Christian. Kantian ethics is based on the work of Immanuel Kant, and it's non-Christian. Then on the teleological side, we'll be looking at utilitarianism and situation ethics. Utilitarianism is non-Christian. Situation ethics, we looked at a little bit in the DCT unit, is Christian. Okay? So, two deontological theories, two teleological. So let's start by looking at teleological, otherwise known as consequentialist ethics. So let's begin by asking this question. Why is kindness good? So just think about this to yourself for a second. Okay, so what would the deontologist say? The deontologist might say kindness is good just because it is good. It's good by itself. It's good to be kind. Not because it leads to anything else. Kindness just intrinsically is good, absolutely by itself. The consequentialist would say kindness is good because it leads to good things. So, kindness might be good because it leads to, I don't know, happiness, it leads to peace, it leads to a world where things are better. So telos is Greek for end or goal. So this approach to ethics focuses on the end consequences. This then states that an action is right or wrong only by considering the consequences it produces. And this is the idea that the ends justify the means. Okay, the end means the goal or the outcome, and the means means the action. So if we look at this sort of graph here, the consequentialist is focused completely on the end. And any action that you perform here is acceptable or unacceptable based only on the outcome, what it produces. So this is why it's called consequentialism. It's based on the consequences. If my action, for example, no matter what, causes happiness, then it's good. And this is why actions aren't focused on as much as outcomes, because if we go back to this situation, pushing the fat man off is good if it leads to a good outcome, saving these people. Exactly the same action is bad if it doesn't lead to saving people, it just leads to this person dying. So it's relative and it depends on the situation. Okay. So take 30 seconds and think, can you think of your own example? We've looked at the fat man example. Can you think of your own example of an action which is consequentialist? Okay. So it might be that you left your lunch money at home and you're desperate for some food, and that's what's going to make you happy. And in that situation, stealing might be right, especially if no one's going to miss the food. Let's imagine that a family is starving to death. Stealing might be okay in this situation because it leads to a better outcome or consequence or telos or goal, which is saving people's lives. Love, kindness, honesty, you might argue, aren't good in themselves. The only reason they're good is because they lead to good things. So a teleological theory maintains that the rightness or wrongness of an action is decided by the consequences that it produces. Okay, the two teleological theories we'll be looking at are utilitarianism and situation ethics. This one is non-Christian, utilitarianism, and this one is Christian, situation ethics. Now, utilitarianism is based on the principle of utility. An action is useful, and it values the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So an action is good if it produces more happiness for more people. Situation ethics says that actions are good if it produces the most love, the most agape love for the greatest number of people. Okay. So pushing the fat man off the bridge to save 5 people. Is this a good action for a consequentialist or a teleologist? Okay, just think about that for 30 seconds. Okay, you can pause the video. Okay. The teleologist or the consequentialist would say that this is a good action. This is a good action. Why? Well, because pushing the fat man off results in 1 person dying, which is bad, but 5 people being saved, which is 5 times better. Is this a good action for the teleologist? Exactly the same action, pushing the fat man off the bridge so that he gets hit by the train, but there's no one tied to the train track. So think about that, pause the video. Okay, so example B is not a good action for a teleologist or a consequentialist because it doesn't lead to a good outcome. You're not saving anyone by pushing the fat man off. So, in summary, consequentialism says that actions are only good or bad if they lead to good or bad outcomes. They're not good or bad in themselves. It depends on the situation in which you're performing them. Okay, so Strimps with the teleological approach. Consequences are what counts for most people. It's what we live with. It's more realistic. People perform actions based on consequences. We behave differently according to what we think the outcomes may be. We do this in ordinary life. So if someone came up to you and said, do I look ugly in this dress? You might tell them a white lie. You might say, no, you look great, because you want them to be happy. And you've just told a lie, right? But it was for a good consequence. It's proactive. You have to react in individual situations. So it encourages people to take responsibility rather than just following fixed moral rules, which is what the deontologist does. It's concerned about the common good. It's not selfish. It considers the needs of all people. So you're trying to make the world a better place by focusing on more good things as a consequence for more people, rather than just focusing on your own moral duty. And people have to make compromises, so self-sacrifice for others. So it creates a more caring community where you're thinking about the greater good for the greater number. But you could also argue that this is a weakness because you're sort of sacrificing one person, arguably, in the fat man example for a greater outcome. So you might argue that that's actually a weakness. And that's something that we can look at now. So one weakness might be you can't be sure of what the consequence of an action is going to be anyway. So let's go back to this example. Let's imagine you push the fat man off and the train kills the fat man, but then doesn't stop and kills all 5 people as well. In that situation, it was bad to push the fat man because you've killed the fat man when you didn't need to. So we don't always know the consequence of our actions. Another example might be, well, someone says, do I look ugly in this dress? And you say no. And then they go out and wear it and everyone makes fun of them. And it would have been the better thing to just say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to tell the truth, you don't look great in this dress. And they put something else on and they look better and they have a better time. So you can't always predict the future. Do the ends justify the means? Remember, the ends is the outcome and the means is the action. So a good example of this is torture. Torture is very consequentialist. Is it acceptable to torture somebody to get information? Let's imagine there's a terrorist and he has a bomb. Or he knows where the bomb is. And the only way you can get the information about where the bomb is by torturing them. Does this make torture acceptable? Well, yes, it leads to a greater outcome, doesn't it? Because you could save more lives. But most people think that torture is pretty bad. So do the ends justify the means? Aren't there some things such as rape, murder, that can never be justified? Maybe there are some actions that are always wrong, and consequentialism doesn't understand this. Deontology does, but consequentialism or teleology doesn't. How could we know what constitutes a good moral result? So this is a tricky situation here. how do we actually know what a good outcome is? And this is similar to the first point, how can we predict the future? But it's also a little bit more about what actually makes something good and bad. Do we actually know what this is? For example, with the stealing of the sandwich because you lost your lunch money. Maybe the best outcome would be for you to go hungry because then you'd learn your lesson. How do we reach a consensus on what a good moral result should be? So, for example, with the fat man situation, you might be in disagreement. Let's imagine there's two people on the bridge and the fat man. Someone might say it's right to push the fat man, but someone else might say it's wrong because the fat man is innocent. So we can't always agree on what a good consequence might be. We also might say that consequences such as happiness and love are relative. Who actually can decide on what the definition of these terms are? So we're going to look at this in more detail when we look at the ethical theories. And then the final one is, can we really make a decision situationally? The train is coming really fast. Do we have all of the tools to make that decision straight away? Surely it's better to rely on past experience, and past experience says that it's wrong to kill. That's why the law says don't kill. Okay, so strengths and weaknesses of consequentialism, teleological approaches. Consequentialism and teleology are the same thing, just two different words to describe the same thing. Okay, so let's look at the complete opposite then, deontological ethics. This form of ethics focuses on moral rules that can't be broken. So you've got an example of Mahatma Gandhi here. Gandhi believed that, some things were always wrong. Even though the British were really bad in India, it was always wrong to kill. The action itself is important, so the focus is on the means, not the ends. It comes from the Greek word deontos, which means duty. You should never kill, even if it leads to a good outcome. It's always wrong to kill. And it's not just killing, it might be lying. The action of doing it doesn't matter what you're doing it for. Lying, murder, always wrong in itself. Okay. So take 30 seconds, pause the video. Pushing the fat man off the bridge to save 5 people. Is this a good or a bad action for a deontologist? Okay, so the decision you should have come to is, it's bad. Doesn't matter that there are 5 people who could be saved. It's wrong to kill. And it's always wrong in any situation. Even if there are 1,000 people tied to the train track, it's wrong to kill. And then obviously it's going to be the same for this situation. It's always wrong to kill. It doesn't matter who is tied to the train track or who isn't tied to the train track. The actual action of killing is immoral. It is wrong. Okay, so there are strengths and weaknesses of deontology, and we'll look at that in a second. But before we do that, let's just have a very quick summary. And let's also look at the 4 ethical theories that you're going to be looking at in this unit. Okay, so is killing wrong? Let's just think about this as an example. Teleological or consequentialist ethics proposes that actions are not right or wrong in themselves. They're only right or wrong relative to the result they produce. Now we have our first teleological theory, which we'll be looking at this week as well, which is utilitarianism. And this is a theory put forward by Jeremy Bentham. So, what would Bentham say? I'm not sure if you can read that. You might want to just look at the PowerPoint and focus in. But here's a quick summary. You don't need to understand this fully yet, but here's a quick summary of what Bentham is going to say. Killing by itself as an act has no moral nature. It can be either right or wrong, but only extrinsically, that means outside of the action, according to its utility or usefulness for the production of pleasure and reduction of pain. This is based on the situation in which it's being performed. Killing can only ever be instrumentally right or wrong. The only thing that is intrinsically good in itself is pleasure as a consequence. So Bentham might say any action is acceptable as long as there is a greater consequence that's being aimed at. The action that produces the best consequence. So if that means killing, then fine, kill. Now, Jeremy Fletcher was a Christian, and he's a teleologist as well, so this is his position. Killing by itself is neither right nor wrong. Killing is therefore only right or wrong according to the love produced as a consequence in individual situations. So this is the same as Bentham, and utilitarianism and situation ethics are very similar. The main difference is that situation ethics is Christian and utilitarianism isn't. So most of the time killing is wrong, Fletcher would say, but it's not wrong in itself. It's because in most situations, killing doesn't produce love. But as soon as there's a situation in which killing does produce love, it becomes a good action, extrinsically or instrumentally, or relative to the consequences of the action in that unique situation. He calls this the relative absolute. There's an absolute deontological law, don't get confused. Fletcher's saying there's a deontological law, but the way we achieve that law is by producing good consequences. So love, Christian agape love, is the absolute law, but it's an outcome, and you can perform any action. If you want to push the fat man off the bridge because that produces more love for more people, then that's the correct thing to do. Okay, deontological ethics proposes that actions are right or wrong in themselves, are simply right or wrong, absolutely independent of any situation, they don't change. So Immanuel Kant has a non-Christian deontological theory. And Kant says, yes, killing is wrong in every circumstance. And he says this because it's our duty as creatures capable of reason to only perform actions that reason allows. Reason does not allow this action in any circumstance because it's not universalizable. We must treat all rational beings as an end in themselves. So again, don't worry if you don't fully understand that. We will be exploring this in the next 6 or 7 weeks. And then second, we've got natural law theory, which is a Christian deontological position. Aquinas is our philosopher for this. So is killing wrong? Aquinas would say, yes. All humans have a nature and a telos to fulfill. Don't get confused here, telos and teleological, because Aquinas' theory is deontological, even though he uses the word telos. So all humans have a nature and telos to fulfill. This telos is to live in the imago Dei, or image of God. Some actions will always be correct, and some will always be wrong, according to how well they help us fulfill our final cause, end, or telos. Killing breaks a fundamental precept that helps us achieve our natural law. This is defend self and the innocent, so it's always wrong. Okay, so that's a quick summary of everything we'll be looking at over the next 7 weeks. You'll be applying the two, you'll be applying the two Christian theories. So that is Fletcher, situation ethics, and Aquinas, natural law. You'll be applying those to euthanasia. And the two non-Christian theories, so utilitarianism and Kantian ethics, to business ethics. Okay, so let's go back to strengths with the deontological approach. So we can see on the right, people who say abortion is always wrong, they are deontologists, aren't they? Because they don't consider whether the mother is very sick, or whether she's too young, or whether she's been raped, or whether the child might have a disability. They believe abortion is always wrong, and for that reason it's very simple. It's very clear, isn't it? This is right, this is wrong. It leads to easy moral decisions. It avoids the problem of trying to predict consequences. You don't need to think about consequences. Weaknesses. The absolute rules of deontological moral theory can never be agreed upon. So even if you say killing's always wrong, some person might disagree and say, I believe killing is always wrong unless you've gone to war, or unless there's mother's life's at risk. So even if you believe an action is always wrong, there are some people that are going to say that there are some exceptions. They also lead to ridiculous conclusions. For example, if you asked, should you kill one person to prevent the death of 1 billion, would you do it? Well, the deontologist is going to have to say no, because killing's always wrong. And that leads to 1 billion people dying, right? Let's imagine there's a terrorist who's about to drop a bomb. Would you kill the terrorist? Well, the consequentialist would, but the deontologist wouldn't. And that would seem ridiculous to some people. Now, there might be conflicting moral duties. So let's say there's a situation in which you weren't allowed to lie, but you also thought that it was always wrong to hurt someone's feelings. Now let's imagine that the woman has come up to you and says, you know, does this dress look good on me? Well, which one would you do? Because if you tell the truth, you've hurt her feelings. So if you don't hurt her feelings, you can lie, but then you've lied. So in either situation, you've broken a deontological law, whether it's don't lie or don't hurt people's feelings. So there's sometimes a conflict in our duties. It reduces morality to simply a list of good and bad actions, rather than trying to help develop our moral character. Also, it kind of relies on telling people what to do. So another form of deontology is the Ten Commandments. And what that means is it stops you thinking for yourself. Okay, so let's think about torture. So this is a torture tool, and I can you can use your imagination for how this is used, okay? But this is a tool that is used in torture. Is torture ever justified? So let's think the prisoner has secrets that once revealed will save the lives of many innocent people. Should they torture the prisoner so that they can save the people? So again, pause the video, take 30 seconds, think about the teleological approach and the deontological approach. Okay, so the teleological approach would say probably yes, because the ends justify the means. The end, the outcome, is saving many lives, and that justifies the means, which is the torture. The deontological approach might say that, no, it doesn't matter what the outcome is, torture is always wrong. It doesn't suddenly become right because it could lead to a good consequence. Torturing an innocent person or torturing somebody who has secrets, just as bad, because the act of torture is always wrong. Okay, so you have 5 examples here. Pause the video and think to yourself, are these statements teleological or deontological? Okay, so let's go through the answers. We would permit the abortion because she's too young and too poor to look after the child. Okay, well, this is teleological. So if it comes up in green, it means it's teleological. And this is because you're saying that an action is allowed, a bad action, you might say, abortion, because there's a good outcome. There is a woman who doesn't have to raise a child because she's too young and too poor. Okay, you should help your mother because it's your duty. Well, that's a deontological statement, because you're saying help your mother because it's a good action, not because you might get something out of it or she might be happy because of it, but because it's your duty. It's okay to steal if you're starving. Well, that's teleological, because you're saying that an action which would normally be wrong, such as stealing, is acceptable because it leads to a greater or a better outcome, you not dying of starvation. Okay, if you tell her the truth, she'll be really upset. That's teleological. Because what you're saying here is that you shouldn't tell the truth because it leads to a bad outcome. And then the last one, whatever you say, just tell the truth. That's deontological. Because you're saying the truth is important. It doesn't matter why you're telling it. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the introduction to ethics. In the next video, we will be looking at our first ethical theory, which is utilitarianism.